All right, everybody, welcome back to the Overwatch Collective podcast. This is Greg, season 8, episode 12 with Melissa. She's out in Southern California. Melissa, how are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, Greg.
Good, of course. I appreciate you coming on. Really quickly, I'm just going to give a therapy statistic update for the Overwatch Collective. So, as of yesterday, May 21, 2025, we're at 262 people who we've connected to our therapist, 2,813 sessions either fully covered or financially assisted, and then a grand total of $286,314 spent on therapy costs. So, ever since opening up May 1, 2025, we've had a few people come through us. We were able to get connected, and we're almost at that 300,000 mark, which is a big hurdle that I am super excited about.
So amazing.
So
Congrats.
it's great. It is great. I know I never would have imagined that it would get this big or anything, but it's great. It's really cool to see the numbers rise, and it's cool actually to see if people are more interested in the amount of sessions, the amount of people, or the money spent. Everybody kind of has their own. So what's yours? I'm kind of curious.
I think seeing the amount of money spent, I mean, just the grand total, like that's incredible. And the amount that has been able to connect these people to therapists, like I think that's awesome. Because the
Yeah, I
financial
like it.
aspect is such a huge piece of what hinders people from getting the support they need. So that's just amazing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I appreciate you and your support. You've been supporting us for a long time. So everybody, Melissa is one of our contracted therapists. She's currently licensed in California, Maine, Washington, D.C., and then the big state of California. Husband is currently deployed overseas. He's a pilot, and we're going to be talking about the challenges that come along with that, some of the mental health challenges as a pilot. And then what I'm really excited about, which is the first time that we have talked about this on the Overwatch Collective podcast, is working with children whose parents are deployed overseas, whether that's mom or daddy, and some of the kids' struggles stateside, the father struggles or the mother struggles overseas, having a kid while one of the parents is deployed and then coming home to a 2 or 4 month old baby. Some of the stuff that doesn't really get talked about nearly enough, I think. So it's kind of just a brief overview of what we're going to be talking about, but I'm excited for this one. Really quick, I'm going to stop talking. Melissa, do you mind introducing yourself, giving the listeners just a quick bio about yourself?
Yeah, no, I don't mind at all. So again, like Greg said, my name's Melissa. A lot of people around here just call me Mel, and my husband is currently deployed with on the Carl Vinson. He's on in the Middle East, and he's an F-35 pilot. He left in November of 2024. This has been his second back-to-back deployment, so it's been a wonky couple years. And I recently, in the last couple years, followed him out here to the Central Valley in California. We're stationed at NAS Lemoore, and yeah, I started a practice here in the Central Valley. I learned that there's not enough clinicians in Fresno, Hanford, Lemoore area. There's not enough support in this area, especially for military. And so that was something that I was really passionate about. I was doing virtual for a long time for my home state of Louisiana. And then once we moved out here, I was going back and forth for a little bit and realized that my calling is to be here and to stay here and to open up something in person. So I went off on my own, took the big jump. And so now I have a little office in downtown Hanford, which is about 20 minutes from the base that we're stationed out of. And I'm able to see all my little kids in person, which is a huge, huge deal for this community. Because once you get like under 7, 8 years old, it's really hard to navigate virtual. And so being able to see my kids in person was a big deal. That's kind of how I got here. And it's growing, which I'm really grateful and feel really honored to be able to walk alongside these families.
Awesome. Awesome. And how is that jumping out and starting your own practice in in the Central Valley?
Yeah.
Scary? Is it challenging? Are you there by yourself? etc.?
Yeah, so it was scary. I mean, I went from a really great group practice to kind of jumping off on my own. And I think it's kind of indicative of what this military life does. It kind of drags you across the United States without much notice or without much choice, to be honest. And so being professionally doing that after I'd already personally done that was quite scary. I think it's been received well. My family back home and friends back home in Louisiana were really supportive. And then me being able to really jump in and be a support to this community here that's lacking has been really, really great. And being a military spouse that also is the therapist has proven to be something I didn't realize was so needed. So scary, but rewarding. So I have a little office right by myself, which is a little bit different than what I was in before, but my clients don't seem to care much. And we have a good time.
Sweet. Yeah, I like it. And well, obviously, and I think we talked about this before we started recording, but this is something that doesn't really get talked about nearly enough. And I think a lot of our service members have experienced being, whether it's mobilized stateside or deployed overseas, but you hear the common, hey, missing birthdays, missing weddings, and your spouse has to go to them by themselves. That's almost kind of like the common thing. And when you sign up to get married with an active duty service member, that's primarily going to happen pretty often. Same thing with the reservists, but we don't really talk about the struggles that the children face, whether it's just a drill weekend or the 2 week annual training for a reservist or active duty. So I'm excited to get into that. But first, before we do that, I would love to touch on the military spouse side of things. So, can you tell us a little bit more about you and your husband, when you guys got married, how long he's been in the military for, what deployment life kind of looks like, challenges that go along? We'll talk about really quick the mental health struggles on a U.S. carrier deployed overseas, repercussions for a pilot reaching out for help, and then we'll kind of just go from there, and then we'll talk about the little ones.
Yeah. So rewind when I was living in Louisiana, my husband was stationed in Meridian, Mississippi, which is where one of the training bases is for the pilots. So that's how we met. We just happened to meet in New Orleans. One day he was out on a weekend away from base, and I was just there with family, and we just happened to come across each other, and then we kind of hit it off. And then we got married. We were together for about a year and a half, and then military things happened. We decided that in order for me to be able to follow him, we did decide to get married in October of 22. So we're coming up on 3 years married. And so that leads us to December of 22. So I got married in October of 22, December of 22. We moved to California. I spent the next year splitting my time between California and Louisiana. So I would fly back and forth every 2 weeks to be able to spend time with him, but then also to be able to see my clients in Louisiana. And after about a year of doing that, I got fatigued. His workup started. Then he went on his first deployment in November of 3. And then he's been gone a lot these last since then. And so now he's on his second deployment. Actually, this week, I was telling some of our OSC, so our officers' spouses group, that it's this week makes 6 months that they've been gone. So, and they've still got a couple more months left. They were supposed to be home at the end of April, but they got extended. So they were out in what's called Seventh Fleet, which is out in the South China Seas. And then with everything that's kind of been going on in the world, they got shifted to Fifth Fleet, which was in the Middle East. And so they got extended 3 months, which we were not anticipating at all, which was a huge blow to like our lives, right? So I think that like when we look at this deployment specifically and the mental health of our spouses that are left behind, that extension was one of the biggest and the hardest things to swallow, especially because it was so long, and we were almost done when we got the news, and so that was a tough one, and that took us a little bit to recover from. But now we're just continuing to truck along, marking off on our calendars another day without our husbands or our wives or our moms or dads, and so that's been a thing. And I think I don't know if I answered all of the questions in there, but bring me back in if you need to.
Yeah, I will, and I'm just it really does kind of shock me when I kind of sit back and listen to you talk about that, where like for us it's always like, oh, like typical military, we're getting extended, but you don't really think too much or too often about how that affects the family. And then when we talk about kids, which we'll talk about in a little bit, right, where I'm sure you specifically as a therapist, it's like, hey, communication's good. You have all these special tools and tricks as a therapist, which is something that I've learned being with Robin. But a lot of people in our military community don't have that. So when it's like, hey, we're getting extended,
Yeah.
I don't have a say in this, essentially. What kind of problems does that cause within the groups, the spouses, significant others of those involuntary extension
Yeah.
of duty?
Well, I would say the first thing to think about too is how the information gets relayed because, you think big Navy. No, it's small Navy and everybody talks, whether they're on the West Coast or the East Coast. And so the filtering of information is like one thing. And I actually was on a flight home. I had just spent a week in Ireland with my husband's family, another missed trip on his part where we all met, but he obviously couldn't come. And I'm like sleeping and we happened to get under a threshold where like a text came through and it was a friend of mine in the group saying I hate the Navy. And I was like what just happened? And then the messages started coming in that like the extension was like now announced, what was going to be happening and then how long it was. So like that in itself was really hard because Christian was trying to reach me and tell me himself, but I found out before he could tell me. So I actually 30 minutes left in this flight, I'm sobbing, crying because I'm like, oh, no, like we were on the countdown. We were like 4 weeks away, like four more putting the trash out by myself, and then finding
Yeah.
out now we've got like 20. Like, this is crazy. And then being able to, trying to be strong for him on the phone and just not being able to, and him being devastated because he can't do anything about it and he doesn't want to go there. And it's just it's just such a helpless feeling. And then on top of that, I don't have kids yet. We don't have, Christian and I don't have children. We just have cats. And, but like our friends that do have kids and have kids old enough to understand what 3.5 more months looks like,
Yeah.
how do they tell them? And
Yeah.
I had some that, just kind of ripped the band-aid off and told them, some that had countdown rings that were hanging up and they just took them off and put them somewhere else so that you couldn't see it because some kids still don't have the concept of time. Definitely like dealing with like relaying that information was so difficult. But then, the support that you get, right? Like from this community specifically, everyone understands, which I think is why like we're so connected, because outside of it, people don't understand. And you get the, well, it's just 3 months. Like, you got this, like, no big deal. And it's like, 3 months is a long time. And so when you get like information like that from people, they don't mean to, but almost like diminishing a little bit and like dismissing the feelings that you're feeling, it's hard to receive support from that. Whereas like from our community, it's like, oh man, like you had plans and now you have to cancel flights and you have to cancel trips and you have to tell grandpa that he won't make it for his 80th birthday surprise, whatever it may be.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's one of the challenging
Yeah.
things, and people probably don't understand what they're doing or how that's coming
Yeah.
across because, like you said, they're not in it, which is one of the challenges. I mean, it sucks that he didn't get to tell you
Yeah.
first and you had to hear through a group. So, really quickly, question for you. With the spouses support group, do you have an ombudsman in there, or what are the resources like for the family members, spouses, significant others of these service members that are deployed?
Yeah, so we have a pretty large. So he's in VFA 97, which is what his squadron is, and so a pretty large like overarching group that includes all of the pilots, officers, like groundos in his squadron, and then the enlisted that support the squadron and the flight crew. And so there is an ombudsman that relays a lot of information to the entire group. And then for my husband, we have what's called an OSC, so an officers spouses group. I want to say that there's like 15 to 20 of us maybe that are in this specific group. And so that's made up of the pilots and then the officers of this squadron. So we are a little bit more of a smaller group that are connected. We have our commanding officer's wife and then our XO's wife that relay the information to us. And then we do stuff to then support the squadron as a whole. So like we've sent goodie bags and like boxes, like moral support boxes every month to the ship, things like that. So we kind of man that support for like the squadron, the whole entire squadron, which is like makes up like 250, I think, sailors in our squadron specifically.
Got it. Okay. All right. Cool. Yeah, I appreciate you explaining that because, and like for me with the reserve side, sometimes like when we would deploy or get on orders, you'd have an ombudsman, but there wasn't really a support group. It was like a Facebook page that would post every once in a while. The resources were honestly pretty shitty, which a lot of the people were upset about and kind of struggling with. And, they always say, like, oh, we got you. We're taking care of you. This is a sacrifice for everybody. And then you have shitty resources there. So, was just curious how it works with y'all. But I'm
And I
glad to
will
hear
say
that you.
it is hard to support on that scale. I think we feel lucky enough, like a smaller group that we can have. And so I think our ombudsman does a really good job of trying to bring everyone together, but bringing that many families together is quite difficult. But base also tries to do a pretty good job of supporting the base as a whole as well and providing resources. But there's definitely some ways to go.
Hmm. Yeah, there's always room for improvement.
Mm-hmm.
And with your husband being a pilot,
Sure.
kind of just curious, really briefly, to touch on the stigma and the potential repercussions for a U.S. military pilot to kind of raise their hand and say, hey, I need to speak to a therapist, or I have some mental health concerns, or something that I need to work on. Do you mind just briefly touching on if that is true, if you've seen it, and kind of how the pilots navigate reaching out for mental health assistance?
Yeah, so there's a lot of regulations, even in general, like of what they can consume. So my cousin is actually a naval flight doc as well. So there's other members of my family that are military as well. And she's kind of explained some of this to me. So like on a physiological side, like they're not allowed to consume certain things like ashwagandha, for instance. Like I never knew that like it's like a natural supplement, but pilots can't consume it. They can't be on certain meds. They can't be, on certain things that could like affect their flight status. And so there's that in itself. And then when it comes to mental health, yeah, I mean, I don't know any of the pilots in our community that are open about talking about mental health at all. I will say that my husband, he tells me a lot. Like we check in on each other a lot, and like they'll lean on the chaplain on the boat, and like the chaplain's doing a really good job of like infiltrating herself with the squadrons to like get to know them and to support them and all of these things that happen. And it kind of being them trying to address mental health from a normalized way and not necessarily like going to therapy, because I do think that there is a stigma like naturally. And even talking to my husband about some of the things that you know they have to do on deployments, as pilots and as service members. There's a lot of things that probably won't ever be talked about and will be kind of kept within. And he kind of joked with me. He was like, that's a future Christian problem when I get back stateside. And so I'm like, okay, all right, we're just gonna navigate that. But it's certainly a sticky subject. Even physical health, a lot of times they won't complain about anything going on, but we've had pilots with hernias and different things that have just avoided it, back pain, because if they complain then they might be downed, which no pilot wants to be down.
Yeah, and I just recorded an episode. I forget which one it was off the top of my head, but it was a prior U.S. Marine, and he was a MV-22 Osprey pilot.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of the same thing where, like, before they would do a mission, they would go around the room and be like, "Greg, are you safe? Melissa, are you safe? Did you sleep enough?" And they wouldn't even want to say like, "Oh, I couldn't sleep because the kid didn't sleep at all, was up 5 times." Right there, like there's a stigma that you have to be on just with normal life stuff, and
Yeah.
then you talk about mental health. So
Yeah.
it's definitely a challenge, and I like hearing it from your point of view, the spouse point of view, because I'm sure you're like, I want to make sure, especially as a therapist, you're like, I want to make sure that you're taken care of, and future Christian doesn't need to work on it. Like you can work on it now, but you're also limited because of the stigma, the potential repercussions, all that.
Well, and I think too, something that is important to recognize is that there has to be some compartmentalization while they're out there. And so, I think that I've been to a ton of trauma trainings in the clinical standpoint of like, you can't start opening some of that stuff up if it cannot be closed. And the reality is that, I mean, yes, there are resources on the ship, but like, when you're not in the state of like being able to really process some of this stuff, then there probably is room for compartmentalization in order to survive, both mentally
Yeah.
and physically. So I think that's a lot of what happens as well. And I think that is okay um, for that individual point of time. And then, then we navigate that, a lot of times when they get home.
Yeah, and hopefully, right, like the demobilization process, they're able to not just do the check in the box check-ins with the mental health clinicians, providers, whatever they're gonna have the option to work with, but a lot of the times that's kind of what it is. So definitely some challenges there, but taking the mental health side out of it and kind of some of the fun side, what's the coolest thing that he's done that you've gotten to do while being a pilot? Like, have you FaceTimed or gotten pictures mid-air? Some of the kind of cool things, right? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so he is an F-35 pilot, which is a little bit more restricted in terms of like pictures and videos. Like he has to put his phone in like a little baggy thing that blocks waves. I
Hmm.
don't know. So some of that stuff has been a little bit more restricted, but I have gotten some videos of like they'll have special people up there like videoing them or different things. He has told me, they've gotten to shoot down some drones out there, like strikes and different things have been really exciting. And he did tell me the other day, he was like, Mel, I look down and I'm over another country. And I was like, that's pretty wild. Like that's pretty crazy to be able to say that like you've flown over another country and just being able to, he takes a lot of pride in what he does and we talk about it a lot, like him recognizing the space that these pilots get to be in. Like they're the only people that get to get off the ship while they're deployed outside of pulling into port and stuff, but they get to get out and be up in the air and kind of remove themselves from this ship life, which I think is something that he hasn't taken for granted. And it's been, I think, a saving grace for him, to be able to go up there and be in the sky and things like that, which is something I'll never experience. I'm hoping that when they get home, they do what's considered like a fly-in. So they fly in formation, and I've seen it happen, but I've never been on in the hangar watching it. And so that's something that we will get to experience when they do finally come home, which I'm really, really excited about. They do this whole formation fly and land once at a time, and then they all open their canopies at the same time and walk out and meet the families. And so kids and wives and husbands are all there to support. I think that's something that I'm really looking forward to, and it's giving me a lot of hope and excitement.
Awesome. Yeah, and I've seen videos of that, right? And you have all these service member coming home videos, and
Yeah.
like it just gives you the chills and
Oh
everything.
yeah. It's so exciting.
I'm I'm a huge fan of fighter jets, and I would do literally anything to go up in a ride in one of those things.
Right?
My big thing is the Blue Angels. Like I'm obsessed with them, and I would
Oh yeah.
love to go sit in the back seat. I think like plane number 7, they do like ride-alongs and all that stuff. I would do absolutely anything to be able to go up in the air, even just to go watch them. Like just listening to the sound, everything. I'm like a little kid,
I'll
you
have
know.
to video their fly-in and send it to you whenever they do finally come in.
Please do. Please do. Thank you. Sweet. So, anything else on kind of being a spouse of a service member deployed, the pilot mental health life before we kind of transition into working with children?
I guess from the spouse side, so one thing that, I've told my husband is that I kind of have slowed down a little bit with work with the transitioning here and then him deploying and I've been
Hmm.
really grateful for that because it's provided me with this space to really be able to support our spouses. And I think
Yeah.
that there's something so unsaid about being able to walk into a room and people just like knowing it and getting it. And so, we come together for dinners, we come together for wine and wine. And we come together to just babysit the kids whenever one has to make it. We've had kids have surgery. We've had moms give birth this deployment. And being able to kind of show up for each other and go for a walk in the middle of the day or just drop off food, whatever it may be, being able to support each other in this journey and, these last 6 months that we've at least experienced has been, I think, an integral part of our mental health and surviving just this deployment stage. And I think that what I've heard is that outside some areas don't have the type of support or the groups. And so something that I would recommend as a military spouse is finding that. Whether it be that you create it yourself or you step out of your comfort zone and like make it an exerted effort to find your group, like that has saved us. Even tonight we're talking about like getting, having fam dinner with another wife whose husband happens to be home because he is now in the training squadron again, but he's cooking dinner for all of us. And so us being able to come together and just kind of be around and have him be able to support us too. There's a lot of things that I think people don't realize about that. So making sure you have your group is huge.
Got it. Yeah, and I appreciate you mentioned that, and I don't think we can stress that enough,
Mm-hmm.
especially when he or she notifies you that they're getting extended for a few months,
Yeah.
Very important to have. So I'm glad that you guys have a great support system, and obviously we have resources for spouses, significant others as well. So I'm sure you're already doing this, but you can pass on our information, our app, all that stuff,
Absolutely.
because I know there's a limited amount of resources, and sometimes the family members are unfortunately forgotten about
Yeah.
in our community. So, transitioning to working with kids, how did you get involved with working with little children whose family members or parents are deployed in the military? How did you get into that?
Yeah. So I've always specialized in working with kids, and I see teens and adults too, but a soft spot for little bitties. And so I'm a registered play therapist by training, which is a long credentialing process. And so I've always worked with kids, and I originally started working with children affected by addiction. My mom was an addict. My grandparents raised me growing up. And so that was something that I was super passionate about and just knowledgeable about because of the lifestyle and what we were exposed to as kids. And so started there. And then when my husband and I met and then got married and then we moved and all of these things, coming across more and more kids, friends kids, or hey, my friend's child is really struggling, are you licensed in California, can you see them? And I
Mhm.
wasn't for a while because it took a bit to get licensed here, but realizing the need was a huge deal. And then finally being able to get licensed. And I remember the first time I had a session, I mean, she was a teen, but we're sitting in it was a Zoom session because she didn't feel like driving off base. But she stops talking because we hear a jet flying over. Well, it flew over her first, and then I heard it like a minute later because of the difference of cities. But we both just stopped talking and then started laughing. Like we were like, of course, like jets ruining
Mhm.
everything, the sounds and her just being like, that was an 18, wasn't it? And I was like, I'm pretty sure that was an 18. It wasn't a 35. Like just being able to have the banter and just to see the ease that she felt because I just knew. Like I knew what was going on. I didn't have to say, what is that? Like, why are you not what like why did it cut out? What's
Yeah.
that noise? That moment was so pivotal. And I said, this is where I'm supposed to be. Like I'm supposed to work with these kids because I understand what it means. And so now whenever I have kids come in my office and they're like, Miss Mel, daddy's on a detachment or mommy's on a deployment or like VFA, blah blah blah, like whatever the acronyms that they say, and then I just say, "Oh yeah, like I heard they came back last week or whatever," and they're like, "Wait, you get it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah," and then they're like, "Wait, what does your husband do?" And so then being able to like see kids light up and then open up. Right? They don't have to explain what that means. And so that knowledge and then combining it with trauma and working with kids that have experienced trauma, it just made sense because of all the training that I have in that realm. And then in recognizing and being able to support these kids of like, no, you have prolonged trauma. Like you have attachment issues. Like you fear being left. Like it all makes sense. And so being able to normalize that and get it Like that's what led me into it. And now just like every kid that I get is connected to the military or, has been or, will be or whatever. And so the things that come up with like making new friends, that's a common one. Missing their old friends in another state or on another base. That's a reality that every military child experiences. Being able to say, that's really hard. And I know it sucks. And, having a kid being able to come in and say, I really don't want to be a military child anymore, Miss Mel, but I don't want to tell dad because I don't want to hurt his feelings. And me being able to say, that's okay. Sometimes I don't want to be a military wife. And that's okay to say. And then being like, I didn't think I could say it out loud,
Mhm. Get
and
it off their chest, finally being able to say it.
yeah. Yeah, and just being able to say, like say those things and sit with them through those feelings and, what is it like for a kid that's dad is coming home next week, but their mom, that other one's not coming home for a month. They get nervous about being excited. And they're like, but I can't show that I'm excited because their parent's not coming home. And so the guilt that they feel when their parents are on different timelines, like that's a lot of what I see too. And being able to notice that, like it's hard. It's hard to even as a spouse, your husband's coming home in a couple months, but your best friend's husband just deployed. And like, how do you sit with that, right? There's a lot of these nuances that start happening over and over again, and then there's these themes. So really being able to recognize them and then being able to work with the parents to support them through it.
Got it. Yeah, and there's a lot more that goes into it than what I thought, right? Like obviously before recording, I'm like, oh, let's talk about this. And then now listening to you talk, I'm like, oh my Lord, I can go so many different directions and ask so
Mhm.
many questions. And rewinding just a little bit, what ages do you see? Is there a specific age range? And then how long have you been seeing children for?
So the youngest I usually go is 3, just because of the cognitive abilities. But I will work with parents that are having issues with children younger than 3. Like I'll usually work with the parent to then support them to work with their kids.
Okay.
And then I see up into adulthood. But yeah,
Okay.
I've been seeing children since 2018. So coming up on 7 years now, and I've had my RPT, my registered play therapy license for about 2.
Okay. And so throughout that 7 years, that entire time, what's the biggest challenge that you've seen with the children of service members who are deployed overseas?
I think it's interesting because deployment is a beast in itself, but the life of a military child is so much more complicated. And so what I see is there's this constant like anticipating change and then like anticipating their parent leaving, them coming back but not being fully relieved because they're going to leave again. Because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're on your sea tour or your shore tour, they're still gone, right?
Yeah.
And then there's the the guilt that kids feel of like I want my parent home so bad, but then but things are going to be weird when they're home. So I'm also like, I kind of don't want them home. Like there's this push pull of like what life's going to look like, right? Like I had a teen tell me the other day, they were like, yeah, my parent put the wrong dishwasher soap in the dishwasher and flooded the house because they forgot how to do it. And they were like this happens every time they come back, and it's like,
Hmm.
it's this interesting go away but come closer that I think kids feel like it's very, very complicated. More complicated, I think, a lot of times than adults, just because adults can explain it in a certain way. Just them navigating the I want them home, I don't want them home, I miss them, I hate them. Like, because that's a big feeling too. I've got a lot of kids that don't want to talk to their parents over FaceTime or phone calls, right? And the other parent that's left behind asking me, like, Mel, what do I do? Like, they don't want to answer the phone. They don't want to say I love you. They screamed at them on the phone yesterday for being gone, right? And so it's really just sitting with these families in this space that they're in and saying, okay, how can we get to a healthier dynamic? And then how can we support healthy relationships? So that may mean having a whole family come in when the service member is home and saying, hey, how can we prep better for this next time?
Yeah, yeah, and that's a great point, right? And something I've kind of been thinking about is what, like before deployment, when you're doing your all your prep to actually go out the door, was there any proactive training or considerations for these service members to be like, hey, ladies and gentlemen, this is time to get your affairs in order, right? Everybody says, make sure your house is in order, your finances, all that. Do they talk about making sure that your kids understand what's going on, or talking to your children, and give any sort of resources or advice on that? Have you heard of that at all?
There are some like talks that are put on, some almost like symposium like things to be able to support and prep. But I feel like on a grand scale of like having resources to be maybe to hand out, or even recordings to watch, that's actually something that I'm trying to work on, of like how can we support these kids and also in different developmental stages, and being able to ask those questions to our spouses, to even if you don't have kids, but especially if you do. What is this communication going to look like? What are the guidelines? What are the boundaries? What do you expect and what do you not, right? Christian and I learned a lot from the first deployment, and then he went on a baby deployment. It's called RIMPAC. He's gone for 4 months in the middle of this one and that one. And we learned a lot in those times away from each other, that we were able to really prep in what did we expect going into this one, which I wasn't ready for the first time. I didn't know what questions to ask. I didn't know what I expected. And so it really was helpful to go through it, but I kind of wish that there would have been some sort of training or process that we could have gone in and started these conversations prior, and it wouldn't have had to be like learning by, baptism by fire. So that's something that I'm actually hoping to create myself, because I see there's a gap in the trainings and in the need.
Yeah, and obviously there's a gap in just listening to you talk about it. There is, and that's kind of like how the Overwatch Collective started, right? We saw a gap and we did it, and I think that would be super cool for you to do. Where if you could put out like little trainings, or even if it's videos or just audio recordings, or like a mini podcast, essentially just an idea, and it could be specifically for the family members that are holding down the fort,
Hmm.
in addition to the children, you think about big picture, right? This is probably not going to happen, but every service member who deploys, gets mobilized, whatever the case may be, they get Melissa's podcast that talks about the tips and tricks and everything that we're talking about now, when your father, your mother, or your spouse, significant other is about to deploy overseas. So at least they get something prior to proactively learn about some of the challenges, what can I expect, etc. Right? Wouldn't that be nice?
Oh, it would be great. I mean, like one of the things popping in my head, which we didn't learn until obviously he was out there, is either turn off two-step authentication or prep it beforehand, because they don't can't get to, even if they have Wi-Fi on their phone, they can't get to their email to then authenticate, or get the text message to like let me into the bank account, to like, because I got all the passwords, but didn't think to prep and like actually log in with him next to me, so that way we didn't have to do two-step authentication. So even like little things like that you wouldn't normally think about. You're like, this, I'm gonna have to wait till you pull into port, which God knows when that's gonna be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. There's so many things that go on that we don't really talk about that affect
Mm-hmm.
the actual service member deployed. It could affect his or her mental health, because if there's challenges at home, stuff that they weren't prepared for,
Yeah.
obviously you have to be mission focused on your A game. But if you know that there's something lingering back at home, and I think that's why we see a lot of the time relationships not lasting when they're deployed.
Yeah. It's interesting, that we're talking about this too, and I kind of forgot because it feels like it's been so long ago, but his first deployment, we had two close family members pass away, and with
Mm.
some pretty tragic details, and it was, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to tell him, and because we hadn't talked about that. No one told us to talk about what if someone dies? How do you tell your person? So what I had to end up doing was talking to another spouse and saying, how do I navigate this? And then they had to talk to the commanding officer and make sure that he wasn't flying that day. And, and because I wouldn't want to tell him before he went up on a flight, like those certain things you don't know. And so as the spouse kind of left behind, it's like, what do I share and what do I not share? And so there can be a tendency for us to become hyper independent and
Mm.
not share some of our feelings, or not share some of our fears, or big events that happen, because we don't want to mess up the potential of a flight or put someone in danger. And so it can
Mhm.
create distance and it can create us leaning on other people, like other friends or family members instead of our partner, which has its whole slew of things. So, like, it's just there's a lot of nuances that go into it. And the importance of talking about it prior is just really, really big.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot that goes into
Hmm.
it. Definitely a challenge, no matter how long, right? Even when
Sure.
they're gone. Like what you mentioned, just trying to get into the bank account and deal with two-step authentication is
Yeah.
something you would never think about. Usually you think about things breaking around the house or missing weddings, events, all that
Right.
stuff. And now you're like, now I have to deal with all this.
Yeah.
Um, so, excuse me, going back to the children a little bit. I know we kind of talked about like the struggles that you see often. What are some of the things that work for these children when they come to you and they're struggling with mommy or daddy deployed and they're on the phone with them and they're yelling at them for being gone, or they don't even want to answer the phone to talk to mom or dad? What are some of the things that you have seen, I guess, improve their understanding of what mom or dad is doing for the country and the service, and then to ultimately make them feel a little.
Yeah, so there's been a couple of things that I've seen that have been pretty helpful with kids. One of them being a daddy doll. So there's this little doll that can be printed, and it's like a little pillow with the got with their person. A lot of them they're daddies, but it also could be a mommy doll too. So having that, like a lot of my friends' kids and a lot of my clients have that in their rooms. I've also recommended parents going and getting Build-A-Bears before their person leaves and recording their voice in the Build-A-Bear. There's also this company that I'm forgetting the name of it, and it's because it's on the tip of my tongue, but the member can record themselves reading a book and then reading it along with the child during the nighttime. I've also recommended a lot just the normalizing, including the other parent in conversation, not shying away from talking about them, not shying away from looking at pictures, those sorts of
Hmm.
things, and including them in the ways that they can. So we've made hugs, right? So I've had a kid like lay on the ground and I trace them with a big piece of paper and then cut the paper out and have the kids color all over their hug, and then us mail that in a bot in a care package or something to their parents, having them be able to communicate in the ways that they can communicate, so not putting as much pressure on the verbalized word. So I mean, I say this all the time with play. Kids love language, or kids language, their first one is play. They're not speaking. And so if you notice, like little 8-month old, 9-month old babies are playing with each other, they're communicating. They may be sitting next to each other and both playing with blocks, but like that's how they are communicating. So relinquishing some of the pressure on like telling daddy or mommy you love them or talking to them all about their day. They may not want to because that's hard. So how can they communicate? Maybe it's them drawing a picture and sending it in a care package, or like taking the silly picture of them and sending it to mom or dad. Like being able to meet the child where they are at, in the way that they're. I've had some kids, they haven't wanted to tell their other parent that they started a certain sport because they wanted to surprise them. And, mom or dad being like, is that okay? Like, is that a secret? And I'm like, honor that. That's something that they're trying to do to cherish that. I mean, you can like tell the other parent and be nonchalant about it, but like they want to
Uh,
surprise you. This is how they're showing you they love you outside of saying the words I love you. And so I've normalized that a lot. And so reading between the lines and like actually matching and meeting that love language is a big thing that we talk about, especially with kids, because it may not be the words.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Like the nonverbal communication, how they're showing that they love, essentially.
Yeah, I think it also makes me think of too something that I told my husband is for me personally, what I missed the most is the normal moments with him, like eating with him and like watching a movie with him and all of these things. So I told him this deployment, I said, I love seeing you up on the flight deck and in your flight suit. That's great. But like, I miss like seeing you live your life. So if you can you send me pictures of you guys eating in the ready room or like having a movie night in their 6-man bunk room, like, opening up the care packages that I've sent. And he's like, I never even thought of that. And I was like, I didn't really either, but like that's what I miss, is like having my husband home. I don't think of like my husband as pilot. So me being able to verbalize that to him was incredibly important, but I wouldn't have known to. And so I tell that to people all the time too, like figuring out what works for your family. And yeah, I don't know.
All right. Very cool. Let's see. I'm trying to think of what else for children who have their parents deployed or in the military.
I know
What else
one
comes to
thing.
mind?
Yeah, one thing I know we mentioned a little bit earlier and didn't touch on yet, because I do think it is big. It's like missing those big life moments. And so one of the big ones that we've experienced specifically in our squadron, and I know it's happened all across the whole carrier air group, is parents that have missed the birth of their child. Um,
Yeah.
and that's something that, like, it breaks my heart. Like, one of my friends was actively in labor when she found out about the extension, and that was just the worst thing I could have
Timing ever.
imagined. And so I'm not really sure that there's any verbiage or wording to like make that better, as other than just like the service members really rallying around each other to be able to love and support them, and being able to say like, hey, how you doing? Like, I know that you miss or just are longing to meet this child. And so just like being able to support each other, that's what I know that they have done on the ship. And then for us, as the spouse is kind of left behind, we did meal trains for both of our moms that gave birth, made sure that they were supported and in the best possible way that we can. But that is like a next level of longing. And I know that some of the dads that haven't met their kids yet, like, I know that they've said things like, it doesn't feel real, like that I have a son
Mhm.
or a daughter, another one at home that I'm going to meet when they're like 4 and 2 months old. Like, it doesn't, like, I can't even imagine. But that's a big piece. And a lot of people say they're not going to let them come home for the birth. And a lot of times, no.
Yeah. 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 I know there have been some circumstances where, and I think you have to go through the Red Cross. But that's a whole process to
Yeah,
get you home. And then, I mean, depending on what kind of mission, and specifically with your husband being a pilot, right? And you have all these flights that are going on. Is it really feasible, or is the CO, are they going to approve you flying home,
sure.
being gone, and they're leaving short? So there's a lot that goes into it, and I think I could not imagine being gone and like us having a kid and then being like, oh my god, seeing through pictures and videos and then going home, and it's that's very very challenging.
Yeah.
At least you didn't have it the worst off finding out that they were getting extended, right?
We laugh about that. I'm like, sorry, sis, like, you take the cake on the
Yeah.
worst place.
Yeah. You get the trophy. I've never heard of that one. I mean, when you said like you found out on a flight or like from one of your friends
Hmm.
and somebody in that support group, I'm like, okay, that's shitty because you would want to hear it from your husband. But in labor to find out, that is
Absolutely. I know. I know. I'm like, gosh, that's horrible. But yeah, it happened.
crazy. Crazy. And that's, and kind of wrapping this whole military thing up. That's why I think when commands and units, when they do talk about the service of the family and how the family serves, I think there's so much truth in that that doesn't even get publicized or recognized whatsoever. And listening to you talk about being a military spouse and then working with children whose parents are deployed overseas, like there's a lot more that goes into it than I think the average Joe thinks, you know.
Yeah, and it makes sense, I think there's no shame in like not really understanding. But I think the difference is like asking the questions and wanting to understand and wanting to be supportive. And I think that like that's exactly why I agreed to do this podcast too, is to shed some light in it, so that way there can be more support in this space where there is a gap of support. And so that's I hope it was helpful.
Yeah, I mean, it helped me. I'm already trying to think of like clips to post, the caption to post for the podcast. Because like I said, this is the first time really talking about it. And honestly, me personally, really thinking about all of it since my dad was deployed. So my dad was deployed overseas when I was in eighth grade. I forget the exact years, but my brother, who's 4 years older than me, like my dad missed graduations, he missed birthdays. We were Skype calling at weird hours, obviously, because of the time change. And my mom's a saint. We put her through so much. But my dad being a police officer in the military, multiple deployments, she's having to hold down the fort.
Yeah.
And then I become a police officer, join the military reserves. My brother's a firefighter. So like we
Right.
put her through a lot. But yeah, I fortunately, at least I don't think, had any major struggles while he was gone, which I'm very, very fortunate
That's so
of.
good. Yeah. Yeah, it's a life. It's certainly something I never imagined myself being a part of, but I'm really honored to be able to love him in the way that he needs to be loved and support our military in the way that it needs to be supported, and this is just my way, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you and your service, not only supporting your husband, but supporting the fellow spouses, the significant others in the support group, and then obviously the children. And something that I do want, like you said, is the video of them coming home,
Yeah.
the flying over, the landing to use for like the social media for talk, but I
Yeah.
want to listen to the jet engines as they fly over because I just love that sound.
It's pretty rad.
And then to be able to see like the video of you guys, everything, I would love to get that and be able to share that and all that. I think that's super cool to see the videos of the homecoming and all that.
Yes, we're counting down the days, so hopefully not too many more months, but we're excited. But I will definitely share that with you guys, and I know that it brings hope to other people that are
Mm.
also in this stage and waiting for their person to come home and to be able to. It's like to hear the flyover is like so incredible. It's like, oh my gosh, families are being reunited. So I know that I feel that, and so I'd be happy to share that with you guys.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on. And let's see. Yeah, I'm excited to cut some clips from this and use
Yeah.
them for social media. And then, yeah, like I said, this is the first time we've talked about a lot of this stuff. And this episode, let's see, I think it'll drop on May 6th.
Okay.
May 6th or May 13th. I don't really know off the
Or
top of my
June.
head.
Is it June, you mean?
Sorry, June.
Okay. I
Yep,
was like,
June.
hmm.
Definitely June. But yeah, excited for this one to come out. And then, so the last kind of thing that I have for you is at the end of every podcast, we ask our guests what our motto means to them. So our motto is one more is one less. And then comes from season 1, episode 6, where a Army combat veteran lost more friends to suicide upon return stateside. So he's like, hey, if we can help one more veteran, give them the resources, that could be one less suicide. And then people talk about one more resource for the family members, could be one less terrible communication during a deployment, one less divorce, etc. So
Yeah.
you're in the hot seat. So I would love to hear what one more is one less means to you.
I guess one more resource, one more support for specifically the kids is one less kid feeling disconnected and one less kid feeling like they want to escape this world.
Hmm.
So I'm just happy to be here. And thanks for having me, Greg.
Of course. I appreciate you coming on. Good explanation all about the kids. I love it. Everybody, this wraps up season 8, episode 12 with Melissa. I hope you enjoyed. And we're all excited for him to come home and see the video.
Me too. Me too. No more
Cheering for
extensions.
no more extensions. All right, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Thank you. Take care and God bless America.